Great. I'm joined by David Dean Bottrell, who is a wonderful actor, acting teacher. And why we're having this discussion is because he's just launched a wonderful acting book. But before I go into a big preamble about how amazing you are and the work you've done, I'd love to ask, and probably should let you define yourself and describe how you identify, I guess, doing so many different things.
So are you asking me to sort of give you my, if I was going to give
give me the, yeah. And I mean, it can be many slashes.
That's what, it's like hyphenated about 5 times now. But I started out as a writer who became a playwright, who became a screenwriter, who became a director, who became a producer. It's like, and who became a teacher. So I've got all of those things are still happening in my life. So it kind of depends on what day of the week it is, which hat I'm wearing. But I a long time ago just started thinking of myself as an artist. I'm a performing artist, and I do a lot of different things. And I'm happy that I've both worked for a lot of people, and I've also created work for myself, which is a pretty fun thing to do.
Mm. Yeah, wonderful. And you've worked, I was looking through your CV before the chat, and you've had an incredible career, the various productions that you've worked on. But as we spoke about in the introduction to this call, you're sort of a fighter for the middle class actor and someone who has done a bit of everything. And would you like to describe that, how you were talking about that before?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, I can tell you, if I can just tell you the genesis of it, I was doing one of my storytelling shows. So that's something else that I do. I really love stories. And I was doing one in LA that was very successful. It was a very funny show about essentially my love life. And it was called David Dean Bottrell Makes Love, a One-Man Show. And it was all these stories about, you know, from true stories out of my life from age 5 up to the present. And it was very successful in LA. It was running a long time, and the LA Times came and gave it a lovely review, which was very kind of them. But in the review, there was this parenthetical that came up right behind my name where they were explaining who I was to their readers. And it said, David Dean Bottrell, a LA-based writer, comedian, actor, perched on the fringe of success. And as much as I appreciated that lovely review, that one phrase bugged me because, I don't know, I've been making my living in this industry since I was in my 20s. And I thought, I'm only on the fringe of success. And I realized we're kind of haunted by this idea that to be a successful actor in a lot of people's minds means being a famous actor. And that's just not true. I mean, there's this gigantic middle class in show business, of which I'm a very happy and proud member of that. And because I started teaching a few years ago, I have a lot of students who, of course, once they start to graduate, the calls will start coming in where they're saying, hey, can I take you out for a cup of coffee? And I know what's coming, which is the big question, which is now that I've gotten out of school, how do I do this? And it's just, those two things kind of led me to actually try to write something about what to expect and what it can be and what it's going to feel like. And the book has a lot of stories in it because it's kind of, I think it's very hard to really mentor anybody if you don't sort of share your personal experience, including the parts where you made mistakes and you screwed up and all of that. So I've tried to be very, very honest in the book and tell them about all the victories that are possible and all the things that go wrong and all the things you sort of need to take responsibility for if you want it, not only to have a happy career, but a happy life doing it.
Mm. Well, the first sort of major question I wanted to touch on, and it might be a difficult one because David is based in New York City, a very big, probably one of the biggest hubs for acting in the world, arguably the biggest maybe, or second to LA. One thing I find, we're based over in Australia, and you know, we have students in countries like New Zealand, maybe in some of the Scandinavian countries. And there is a sentiment that there isn't that middle class, that you kind of have to, just because there isn't just enough work to support a career, that you kind of do have to make it really big or go international or, land that big pilot or that big film. I wonder if you have any advice for those smaller countries, but I'd also be interested in how it works in America, whether there is that solid kind of middle tier where you can live well off it, but maybe you're not a celebrity.
The thing about this is that it is so individual. Each person's career is so completely unique. I'll use mine as an example of it. Not that I'm the pinnacle of anything, but I've had a career for a number of years now where I'm mostly known for being on television, and people will say, "Oh wow, I just so admired your career, and oh you're so busy on television," and I'm not. I'm not that busy on television. I have this sort of strange niche in the industry where I'm called upon usually when they need someone who's very disturbing or someone who's very freaky or something like that. And so then luckily they think of me and I come out of the mothballs and I will do some pretty good sized role and have a lot of fun doing it, and it's great.
Mm.
And then it's usually on a fairly well-known show with pretty good ratings. And so there's this, and when people see it, and it's rerun a few times and all that, and people sort of have this illusion that I'm working much more than I am. And so the question is, what happens between those jobs? If I'm going to do, I don't know, 5 guest stars a year, that's a good year, 5 guest stars a year. What happens between? Do I go and do theater somewhere? Do I teach? Do I take directing jobs? A lot of what I did was when I found these glitches, when I'm thinking, I want to make a living in my business. And I thought, well, if I can't, what do I do? Do I do commercials, or do I try to do voiceovers, or what do I want to do? And for me personally, I found my way into learning how to write because I loved writing. And I found my way into learning how to direct and learning how to teach, so that I always had something that was available for me, so that when I was between gigs, I didn't have to go work really outside my field,
Mm.
And a lot of people have, patted me on the back and said, wow, you're such a Renaissance man. You go out and you learn how to do all these things. And the reality is, it wasn't that I really wanted to do that. It's just that I didn't want to go back to being a waiter. So I kept thinking, well, what else could I possibly do here? And I found my way into these other fields so that I never had to go very far from what I wanted to do, which was to be a performer. So I would say to people that as long as you can sort of live creatively and make money creatively between your acting gigs, I think you're a successful actor. I think that makes you a successful artist, because we don't always really control how often they're going to need our particular type of actor. There are many, many different types, some of which are very employable, some of which are needed. They're needed periodically, but we can't always sort of guarantee when they're going to need us. Plus, every 5 years, we sort of age into a new type, into a new category. So it's a real juggling act to kind of keep going.
Yeah. So that's really interesting to hear. I mean, do you think, I guess we should talk specifically about America because that's your domain, but do you feel, I mean, you say you potentially do 5 guest roles a year. I mean, most people in Australia would be certainly considering that a hugely successful year of acting. I mean, do you think, even kind of how you're describing it then, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily been plausible for the most part for you to live purely off acting? I mean, you were talking about that kind of middle class or living off your acting without really hitting the big time. I mean, do you think that is a reality then?
Well, I mean, guest star roles, I think you're paid well for your time, but and 5 is a big year for me, by the way.
Sure.
That's a big year. 6 is a gigantic year. Oftentimes it'll be like 3, but now in the economy, at least in American television, which is where I do most of my camera work, it's been squeezed. The whole business has become much more corporatized, and so now everything is how cheaply can it be made. So they're always trying to kind of jam these production schedules together in such a way that I might have 4 scenes, but they want me to shoot them in one day, just to sort of like kind of squeeze my fee down. So all of a sudden, what used to be a larger chunk of change, everyone's negotiating against now. So it's become tougher to get larger pieces of money for the work. So, and also, I could do 5 guest shots in a year and literally work work in front of a camera. That would turn into 7 days of work. What am I going to do with the rest of the year? And again, when it shows up on TV, it makes such a splash because, oh, look at you on TV. But people tend to think, oh, you must be just rolling in money. Not to mention the fact that there are things like taxes and agents' fees and manager fees and union dues. And it becomes, and then thank God we have residuals, which is great, and that comes in a little bit later. But I just sort of, if you want to like buy a house, or if you want to, take a vacation once in a while, or, enjoy your life a little bit, you sometimes have to think what else might be out there. And like I said, a lot of actors find that other niche, like the voiceover work, or I have a friend who does a lot of audiobooks, and or like I said, teaching or producing or directing or anything that can also kind of be creative and wonderful that's inside your field. And I also know people who do other things that are kind of wonderful, amazing, wonderful musicians, and whatever you can do that I think is, if you're creative and you can make some money doing it between acting gigs, I think you're a huge success. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, look, one of the things you say very early on in the book is, you ask that eternal question about whether I should do this with my life, and certainly a question I get a lot from actors I work with. And I get to see, I'm sure you as well, get to see both sides of the coin. I get to see actors maybe later on in life who've done the more conventional path and they regret that they never pursued it. But I also get to see actors who in a way maybe still go to drama school, spend 3 or 4 years at drama school, and then maybe spend 5 or 10 years in the industry and never get really any momentum. And you see as well the kind of, it can be how brutal it can be if you don't get that traction. Why should you do this with your life if you're a passionate actor?
Well, okay. That's a very good question. That's a really good question. I think that, the easiest answer, which I know is kind of silly, is there are people who cannot do anything else. They have to do this. It's just in them to do it. And I think I was one of those people. I just felt like there wasn't any other path I could do that would make me happy. And I'm quite grateful, not that I haven't had my rough patches in the world of show business, and I'm really grateful that I did it. I think nobody really knows until you try. There are people I know, and I'm certainly not going to name names in a conversation like this, but there are people I know that I was surprised had a career in show business, but they found that niche for themselves. But I was I didn't think they were and that's arrogant of me to say that, but I didn't sort of think they were going to do it. They were going to sort of really have the tenaciousness or really had the originality to do it or whatever, but they made a career for themselves and it worked out. And there are other people that I thought were so talented but could never quite stomach the business part of it. They were in love with the art, but they never really quite made that transition to realize, oh, I've got to find how my art works in a business. I've got to find a way to convert my art into some kind of commerce along the way. And for some people, that's a little heartbreaking. They don't want to do that really. They just want to do it for the love of it and the purity of it. And so they never quite wrap their head around what needs to be done to become someone who can fit into those casting categories that they've got to be able to put you in, so they know what to do with you and what to call you on. But it's a tough one. I don't think anybody knows until they try. You just got to try for however long you feel you should try. And then if it's not coming to life for you as a career, that doesn't mean you can't still act. I mean, that's the beauty of it. You can always find some place to enjoy that wonderful experience. You don't have to be a professional at it to enjoy it and love it and bring a little light into the world and make people laugh and cry and all that. So I try to be very sort of democratic about this. My feeling is get out there and give it a swing and ask questions and try hard and see what you learn about yourself in that. Somebody else told me something just the other day that I really loved, which was his answer to people, his students who asked him that was, he asked them about the applause. He said, as long as that applause is not answering some need that should be answered by something else, you're okay. You're all right. You have the right mindset to try to go into this. And I thought that was a pretty good answer, actually. But it's very personal. Everybody's journey is awfully personal. Now, you teach as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, and we have a really wonderful online community. What you just said before about, I say to a lot of people that for some people, the idea of making a career of it can just be too painful, and seeing people around you do marvelously well while you're stuck, or the financial issues, the many issues. But I think you're absolutely right. There's always an outlet for it, whether that's in a class format or doing a community show or something. So I think that's absolutely right. I'd love to ask your opinion, because this is another big thing I get from my students a lot, is people say, well, you've got to give it a go, you know. But the biggest feedback I get from students, particularly students who maybe haven't gone to a traditional drama school, so they haven't got that sort of leg up into the industry, there is no giving it a go, because they never get the audition, or they never get seen by the agent. And we talk a lot about the kind of catch-22s in the industry of never being seen because you have no work, but you can't get any work because don't have an agent. Or do you come across that a lot, that this sort of feeling of being stuck, like you can't really give it a go? And do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I do. I think especially now, my favorite new job title in the industry is content provider. That is my favorite new term that has come around, because certainly when I was a young actor, the idea of making your own web series or making your own independent film, that was almost impossible. I mean, that was quite an undertaking in those days. And now that's not so hard to do any longer. If you're talented and you have talented friends that are, you can sort of help you with the filmmaking aspects of it, and you can sort of come up with an idea that is intriguing or funny or terrifying or whatever it is. It's really, you can kind of create something for yourself. And even if it's not brilliant, at least you had the experience and you can look at it and go, oh, wow, okay, I see how this works now. And you can take a step up artistically from that by just creating work now. And anybody who's got a smartphone in their hand can do something. You can create a YouTube video, you can create a character, you can do something out there. So and you never know where those things go, or if it looks good. Nowadays, I think it's true with a lot of agencies and a lot of casting people, they don't really want to meet you in person any longer. They just want to see a clip of you. And then they'll make a decision based on that clip. Like if they want to sort of, it's much easier to go click at their desk whenever it's convenient, as opposed to actually slate time for you to come in and meet. So it's a new world in that way, but it's also, there's a lot more access in a way. And I will also say the whole history of show business is filled with people who were told they were never going to make it. People who, you're too weird, you're too strange, you're too offbeat, you're too something, you're too tall, you're too short, you're too fat, you're too something, you're too ethnic, you're too whatever. And those people then took it upon themselves to create work. They created it, and they had talent that came bursting out of them at that time. And so they found a way in, and then they were recognized for that, and some of them became gigantic stars. But man, there's many stories of people who couldn't get an agent forever. And there've been some stories lately, of course, with a couple of actors that come to mind, like a friend of mine, Margot Martindale, who's doing awfully well in the States anyway, she didn't really start doing awfully well till she was about 60 years old, and now she's doing amazingly well. And you never quite know when the pieces will come together and someone will knock on your door. So I'm a big believer in, if you don't know how to create content, then you need to start making friends with people who do, so that you can become part of their club and support that person who knows how to do it. Because I've seen several groups of people really go up together because they put their energies together and made something. They didn't wait for somebody to knock on the door or ring the phone and say, oh, we want you. They chose themselves and made something. I think that's really smart, especially now.
Do you still, if a young actor came to you now, or an actor at any age, would you still recommend a kind of formalized training? Is that still a beneficial thing in the States, or do you think now there's more fluidity in the system?
I think it's essential to train. And unfortunately, I don't know if they have this in Australia right now, but there's a new thing that's kind of cropped up in our world called, casting director workshops, where you pay money to go in and read for a casting director. In theory, it's an educational thing, and then they give you a brief set of notes based on what you've done. And it's really, obviously it's not really an acting class. They're not really sort of getting in there and working with you. They're just giving you a couple of notes based on what they saw in front of them. But it's an opportunity to be seen by someone who could conceivably call you in for actual work. So more and more that's becoming increasingly popular because people think it's like a shortcut, and they start thinking, well, why should I pay money for a traditional acting teacher when they can't help me in my career? And so, but the bad news is a lot of people are going in before they know how to do what it is the casting director wants to see from them. They're not really, they haven't really trained, so they don't really know how to connect all those dots and make something interesting and truthful happen. And so they're not really doing themselves a favor by going into those workshops. So I'm a big believer in getting in class and staying in class for a while, because sometimes people think, oh, okay, I've been here for 6 weeks. I got it now. I got it now. And maybe you have some of it, but maybe you want to stay a little longer and test that out a little bit, and test it out on different kinds of material, and start to kind of figure out how you work as an artist, because each of us is kind of a unique combination of things. I'm a big believer, and this is even more weird. I still take class from time to time. I went and took a musical theater performance class last year, and not that I've ever done a musical before, but I just wanted to see what that felt like, and just kind of stretch that muscle a little bit and see it. And I had an amazing experience doing it. And I know I grew, as an artist from doing that. So I'm a believer in just keep testing yourself, keep finding out what you can do, and keep growing as long as you possibly can. It will only get better. It will only help you.
One thing you touched on before, which I thought was really interesting, was reflecting on some of the people you maybe expected to do really well, maybe back in the day when you trained with them, and the ones that kind of were surprising. Do you think, with the amount that you've worked with actors and you've seen actors go past you and go, give it up and whatever else, do you think there's anything to be learned? Is there any commonalities amongst the success stories? Or do you think there is a level of randomness and luck that we just have to accept?
I'm thinking of somebody I know who has become very, very successful, who seemed like she was a star before she was a star. When she walked into the room, she just had that confidence, and people paid attention to her, and people wanted to talk to her, and she had a lot of skill, and as a performer, she had a lot of skill, and she was not afraid to, say, let's, oh, that's an interesting project. Let's get together and talk about that. And people did talk about that, and things happened. And so she was somebody who you could sort of tell from the get-go had that sort of charisma that I knew was going to serve her well. I know somebody else who is a very particular type. This guy's a type of actor, and there are always going to be roles for him. He's a particular kind of, like, if you need the cop, if you need the investigator, if you need the military guy, if you need whatever, there's always going to be a role for this guy. And he is consistent. I'm jealous of how many jobs he has every year. He is always employed. He doesn't get many opportunities outside of that. But within that particular frame, and God knows the entertainment industry's, TV and film is never going to run out of cops or military men or any of those kind of characters anytime soon. So he's having an incredible run in terms of staying busy. But I guess I would say the people I know who really have had long kind of successful runs at it do understand what they do and what category they are in, and how to kind of remind everybody, all the job givers, that they do this particular thing very well, and that they are available to do it again. And that's kind of a knack in a weird kind of way. But I would say that all those people have confidence in knowing what category they fit into. And they do that.
I would totally agree. In my time so far, seeing the people who have done well, they're very clear with where you would place them. I guess as someone personally who feels particularly unclear about where I sit, I'm 6'7", and I'm, got whatever, my own personal issues, which we won't go into. But I'm sure, what do you suggest? Because there's a part of me that sort of reels away from my more artistic side, maybe, of talking about what category I sit in, because I think we all want to think that we're very versatile and we can do whatever. Hamlet,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Home and Away. But do you suggest an actor investigates that, or how do they broach that subject of knowing that it's important to kind of know your niche or your category, or do you let other people decide that? How do you go about it?
It was, I do think it's important if you want to have appointments with casting directors and agents, because that is literally their job. Their job is breakdowns come in for projects and everything is categorized. They're looking for particular kinds of actors to play those roles. And there is some creativity in that process. Sometimes they're able to bring in interesting actors that maybe no one would have thought of for that particular role. But they also need to back those interesting ideas up with some very dependable actors that they know can deliver that particular kind of role. So it's a business. And so if we want to be in that business, we do have to kind of assist them. Like we have to tell them what categories we have to let them know in some way. Now, the other side of that is the artistic side, which we always want to try to stretch. We always want to try to get out of our category and try to do other things. And the beauty of that is work begets work. And even work that is unpaid work, I believe, begets work. I've done a lot of stuff that if I thought it was kind of a clever script or I thought the people were talented, I was like, sure, I don't care. I don't care if I get paid or not. Let's just do it. And that's led to me meeting people who then a little later had some success, and that boomerang back around, and I got a chance to do something interesting with them. And the other thing I was going to say about that is, when I first, I think I told you before we started the interview that I had done some screenwriting in Hollywood. And when I first came to Hollywood, I was like Mr. Independent Film. I just loved crazy independent films. And but when I went to Hollywood, what those studios wanted to hear from me was what kind of a studio film can I present to them? And I didn't know what to do at first because my sensibilities were so kind of artsy and crazy and all that. And I went to, they don't have these anymore, they're long gone now, but do you remember video stores? Like actual video stores? And I went to one and I started walking up and down the aisles and I started looking at all of the movies there. And I just started writing down names of movies that I like. Oh, I like that movie. I like that. That movie was funny. That movie was good. And these were movies that were made by studios. And I started thinking to myself, okay, there's this movie and this movie, and it's this type of movie or it's that type of movie. It was made by a studio. What is my version of that movie? And it helped me to sort of change my thinking a little bit so that I could start coming up with ideas for movies that I could actually sell to a studio. And I learned how to do that. I learned how to take my sensibilities and adjust them a little bit. So one of the great things about theater, I think, is that we are much freer to be cast in all kinds of crazy, wonderful, bizarre things, or really romantic things, or really extraordinary things, or classic work. Anything at all is possible there. You can really get your soul is really fed by a lot of that work. And sometimes in television and film, you're fitting into a niche a little bit. That doesn't mean you can't do it well and be very proud of that work. And sometimes really interesting, cool things can happen. And many times I've gotten a role because I didn't do what they expected. I did something very unexpected with it. So that's always possible. But my agent a long time ago said, never ever forget it's a business. And don't forget what the jobs of the other people are. And the casting director and the agent's business, they're in the business of trying to fit people into those categories because it's a machine that has to be fed. So as long as I think of it as it isn't really limiting me artistically, but it's giving me a chance to make some money and get my face out there and kind of it increases my opportunities. I don't really resent it. I don't feel weird about it. I just try to do it well. That makes sense?
Yeah. And do you have advice to actors of how they discover that? Because I think actors themselves can see themselves in a very different light too. I mean, I don't think people would have necessarily looked at you and gone, oh, he's the go-to creepy guy, as you were saying. Hopefully not in the street. They're not thinking that.
This is something that is kind of one of the more frustrating things, and actually kind of the cool thing about being an actor, I think, is you really do change several times. If you think about actors with really long careers, they go through stages as they go along, and all of us do. even us
Mm.
people like me who are not famous. And, you know, when I was very young, I played just really innocent kind of farm boys all the time. I was very, very sweet and very nice. I played very naive kids, you know. And then I kind of aged out of that type. I kind of wasn't really young enough looking to play that, but I wasn't old enough looking to like be a young man or a young juvenile. And I had a weird glitch there, which is when I started writing, was because I couldn't kind of fit into a category. And then somewhere along the line, I was asked, I think after I'd done some screenwriting, I think my first psycho role came up for me. And I was surprised that after all the years of working in the studio system, how quickly I could inhabit the role of a nutcase, having worked with so many of them by that time. And now, I mean, it's just sort of one of the things I do. Thank God I'm getting some other things now that are not just creepy people. But I discovered I had a little talent for it by just trying it. I tried it and discovered that I was not afraid to go into an audition and make everybody supremely uncomfortable in the room. And then once I'd made everyone very uncomfortable and the audition came to an end, I would make a little joke just to kind of break the tension and just to let them know that that wasn't really me. You know what I mean? That I'm actually a fairly, you know, affable, nice guy and all that. I think my best advice I have is acting class is a wonderful place that's the safest environment in the world to try on a new hat, you know, to figure out, does this one fit me? Does this coat fit me? Does this limp or accent or whatever it is you're going to try, does it fit me? And sometimes you discover things that you really, my God, some of the stuff I've done now, I would never have known when I was in my 20s that I could do, that I could pull it off. And so it's been an interesting journey to just kind of experiment as you go along. And like I said, class and theater are two of the greatest places to find out what you could do. And then sometimes when you go into, if they need somebody, especially if they need somebody to pull off something difficult, they're quite happy to see you when you come in and you can do a Lithuanian accent. Do you know what I mean? They're quite happy to see you.
So it's more experimenting, and then where the particular style resonates with you, rather than going, okay, well, he's, rather than just going on maybe some physical attributes, or he's got a deep voice, he's always got to play the villain, or some other, or I guess it's a combination of both in a way.
You know, I'll tell you, if you keep hearing something repeatedly, like someone says, oh, you seem like this kind of a character, I bet you would, I could imagine them casting you in such and such way, and it has never occurred to you before, that if that suggestion keeps coming up, I think it's worth listening to and worth investigating. Because if someone's seeing something that you don't know about yourself, there's probably a reason for that. And part of being an actor is kind of, learning who you are as an actor. And the other thing I would say is that, when I first started out, I wanted desperately to be Sean Penn. I mean, I write about that in the book. I was desperate to be Sean Penn. I wanted to be the next Sean Penn. And as it turned out, they already had a Sean Penn, so they didn't really need another one. And so what happened was I discovered that, I was actually kind of funny. I wound up in a couple of plays where I stopped trying to be Sean Penn and I started trying to be myself, and I began to get work by being funny. And it was such a relief when I did that, because that fit me so much better than my bad Sean Penn impersonation did. So part of it is learning kind of who we are. And, sometimes we don't really value what comes easily to us. We think, oh, that couldn't possibly be, real talent or real art or real theater or real film. But oftentimes it's really kind of, it's kind of our best resource is kind of what comes easily to us. Does that make sense? I don't know if I phrased that terribly.
No, there's a lot in there, I think, to think about. And yeah, I genuinely think the advice is great, of just exploring. I think people stop playing and trying, and I think that's really great to hear that from you as well. One of the big chapters, you've kind of beautifully broken the book up into this sort of analogy with doors and opening doors and finding doors. And near the end, it's keeping the door open. Once you've maybe had a little bit of success, or you're starting to feel the momentum. Or I guess the flip side of that is, as you said before, having those long periods of maybe no work. What do you think? I know you've already spoken about doing other things to help you stay creative. What advice do you have for those darker days or those years maybe without work and where you really feel stuck and like the momentum isn't happening?
Well, I'll tell you, there comes a point, I think this happens for everybody, where, and it can happen at any moment, you know, it's like you're up for a job and you think, oh my God, I've got it. This one's really going to change everything. And then you don't get it, or it goes to some actor that you know, or it goes to some famous person and they were really just kind of jerking you around while they negotiated with the famous person. And that can be really, they can really be like a gut punch. They're really hard, those. And it can be very sobering. And I think how we deal with those moments determines our kind of emotional and artistic health for the years to come. Because if you start feeling like you've been sort of cheated out of something, or if you feel like that everybody's kind of a horrible backstabbing wretch in this business, or that it's, you know, all illusion and it's all lies, or, you know, all those kind of things that, you know, we're going to feel once in a while because it's a rough business. It's very personal. You can't not take it personally. I think it's ridiculous when people say, oh, don't take it personally. How could you not? But I'll tell you something that I've kind of been happy to know, which is like in like the casting business, for instance. I've outlived a lot of casting directors. You know what I mean? A lot of the casting directors who were in business when I was a young man, they're gone. But yet I'm still an actor, you know? Some of the agents that I worked with many years ago, they're not agents anymore. They're gone, but I'm still an actor. And I do it because I love it. And I think it's an extraordinary art form, and I'm really proud to do it well. And I'm really amazed when I get to work with incredible people. And I've got some chapters in the book about those experiences of working with people who just opened my eyes to how great it could be. And the experience of working in front of an audience when you have a really lovely piece of material to offer them, and to be present in the room when they receive it is kind of a great gift. And that, some of that stuff, no one can take away from you. They can't. And if you love that, it can sustain you. And if you love finding out more about your art form, that can sustain you until the next paying job comes up. But you got to commit to that. You got to let nobody get between you and your love for this stuff. And you got to believe in it. I think you got to believe in it. Like, I guess a religion that's not the right way to say it, but you got to believe in the art form, because it's not just for you, it's for the people who are going to see it and see their own lives represented up there, and see you help. I mean, as artists, oh my God, we're kind of the new church. You know what I mean? We help people understand how to survive things, and what matters, and when to stand up, and when to back down, and when to bow out gracefully, and when to fight for that which really matters, and how to survive tough stuff. And people see us do that work, and if we do it truthfully, when it happens to them in life, they have some model for it. I know that sounds pretentious, but
not at all. No. Yeah.
I really believe it's true. I think that, you know,
I think
people are inspired by it.
Yeah. I think it sounds pretentious until you once again see the occasional play that you go, holy, yeah, wow, this is why we do it. Or the film that you go, oh yeah. And you remember just how important this work is. So I totally agree. And I've got so many more questions I would ask, but I think that was such a beautiful way to finish, and a really positive note to end on. There is much more incredible insights and discussion points in David's book, which is called Working Actor. It's only been out 10 days. Is that right, David?
Yeah, around that.
Yeah, beautiful. So very exciting. I encourage everyone to go and check it out. And hopefully David and I will, I hope, I'm putting him on the spot here, but we'll be doing some other collaborations moving forward, because I loved your insights, David, and it's really great to hear from someone who is still so positive and isn't selling this idea of getting famous and hitting it big, but loving it for the art and showing that you can sustain a career and have a wonderful life, you know, whilst doing many different artistic things. It's fantastic. Beautiful. Well, thank you, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I really had a great time, Andy. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it was lovely to chat with you.
Conversation.
Yeah. Thank you, David. We'll talk again soon, mate.
Take it easy.